Welcome friends again to the channel. Today I have selected Mamang Dai's a very famous poem called Small Towns and the River. In this poem, what we have selected to discuss, there are certain topics which are significant, and line by line we are going to discuss the poem thoroughly. There are also significant aspects like themes, symbols, imagery, etc. which are present in the poem. This poem, Small Towns and the River, gives us an insight towards the nature, the permanence of nature, and in that way the poem becomes a significant poem of Arunachal Pradesh. But before we go into the direct discussion of the poem, let us understand first what to know about the poet first. Small Towns and the River by Mamang Dai is a poem of Arunachal Pradesh. She was born of Shillong, Meghalaya, where she did her schooling from, of Assam, where her graduation with English honors from Guwahati University. There are a little bit of informations about Mamang Dai here. She received also Padma Shri, and this poem reminds us of Villiers Elvin, George Gerson and Jim Corbett. So the poet is a significant one of India, specifically from Arunachal Pradesh. After knowing the poet, let us know about the area, the northeast region. The site is basically a site of political tension for a long time. These tensions exist between the states of the central government as well as the natives of the migrants from other parts of India. And it explains, basically the poem explains the cartography and topography of the northeast India indirectly, how it was in the past, how it is now, how the indigenous tribes and cultures of it contrast to, as well as taking us for ethnographic sociolinguistical study. And the last part is about the poem. The poem was published in the collection called the River Poems, published in 2004. The collection explores the themes of nature, identity and human relationships with the environment. So what we are going to explore in the poem, these are the factors, basic meanings of the lines, explanation of the lines, some significant topics of the poem, and other references. Other references means extra textual material that you are going to read except this poem. So without wasting time, let us move on to the first stanza. Stanza 1. Small towns always remind me of death. My hometown lies calmly amidst the trees. It is always the same in summer or winter, with the dust flying or the wind howling down the gorge. So the significant parts that we must understand, that here the speaker begins by describing a hometown that lies calmly amidst the trees. It is second line, as you can see. Hometown here is the archetypal village. So it is a reference, it is a symbolical reference rather. It is the archetypal village of every country or every area. Mamang Dai introduces the first paradox of the poem here. You see, small towns always remind me of death. The poet says small towns, that reminds her of nothing other than death. Now what she has seen, felt, how the communities have been living, burying the dead, carrying on with rituals and beliefs, and in the midst of all, she lies with her divided self. Split personality in choosing in between the two as for where to go, where it to opt for. That means that whether she has to live there or leaving her community. So there lies the paradox, there lies the difference, that why does the small town, or rather why do the small towns remind her of death. This calm town situated amidst the trees is symbolic of the ominous silence of death. The image of this small town brings back memories of the dead ones. To the speaker, the town seems unchanged, as it says, it always, as you can find here, it always the same in summer or winter. As the hometown, as the archetypal village, it remains always same. Here the dust, with the dust flying or the wind howling down the gorge. See here, dust is the representation of another symbol of death, and it is also an aspect of synecdoche, the rhetorical figure. It is a symbolical measurement, it is a symbolical reference to something else. And the reference to dust also reminds us of Bible, where dead bodies are compared to dust. Dead bodies, where dead bodies eventually go to the dust. This monotony of or never-changing nature of a town is also characteristic of death, which is an unavoidable truth. Which is the unavoidable truth? That death is the unavoidable truth. The wind is personified as howling down the gorge and becomes a symbol for the valley of death. It creates a gloomy mood. Not only it creates a gloomy mood, it sounds also, it gives us an effect of onomatopoeia with the wind howling down the gorge. It resonates the pessimistic tone. So throughout the stanza, we have learned only one aspect, the death note or the death tone. Now, what about the second stanza? In stanza 2, the lines are, just the other day someone died, in the dreadful silence we wept. Looking at the sad wreath of tuberoses, life and death, only the rituals are permanent. Just the other day someone died. See, here an incident that happens with the private life of the poet, and she is delineating here. This draws the readers closer to the poem and the very town itself. The line, in the dreadful silence we wept, implies the closeness of the people. See, we here, in the dreadful silence we wept. When one person died, the entire town mourned the loss together. This is the significance of the line. The idea of immortality is thus introduced. As well as, but what is immortal is not the person, only the rituals. Because in the latter lines, what you will find, looking at the sad wreath of tuberoses, and after that the last line, only the rituals are permanent. So here the idea of immortality is sounding very loudly. After seeing the sad wreath lying on a dead person's bosom somehow reminds the poet of her mortality. Here the poet presents the tuberose as a messenger of death. And this happens to our region too, where a tuberose implies the death, the very tone of death. Tuberose is also used for the marriage, the purpose of marriage, and when a dead body is lying nearby, you can find easily the tuberose there. So here the sad wreath of the tuberose is an impact of the messenger of death. Life and death, there is a repetition. You can easily see that life and death is written in immediate repetition to highlight its cyclic nature. It is constantly changing. Millions of people are born and they die. Natural. And we never know when or where or how it may happen. But if one thing is permanent, it is the rituals, for they are followed throughout the generation. So why is that so? Because rituals are man-made. Life and death are natural process. Hence, they are always changing. Rituals which are man-made, these processes remain the same because there will be no changes at all. So when you find rituals at your home that from immemorial time, those are happening in your home, you can find those are unchangeable. But if you find a person is born, eventually that person will die. So this is not unchanging, this is not permanent. But the rituals are permanent. This is similar to the way the town, a man-made structure, remains the same throughout the different seasons as mentioned in the previous stanza. So the rituals and the towns both are fixed, they are unchangeable. Here the poet turns the maxim, nothing is permanent except birth and death, upside down. So what is the idea? The idea is that birth and death must be permanent and everything is changeable. Here the poet says, everything is not changeable, rituals are permanent, and life and death are changeable all the time. So human beings are very vulnerable. The last two lines reflect the poet's disillusionment about life after seeing many deaths. The lines remind us of Tennyson's Tears, Idle Tears, where the line, "O death, in life the days that are no more, crossing the bar, I hope to see my pilot face to face when I have crossed the bar." So in these lines you can find the similarity. In memoriam also there are lots of lines, voices, which are similar to these lines, particularly only the rituals. So permanent, life and death, the issue between life and death, etc. So from this stanza we learn that town and rituals both are man-made. So they are unchangeable. They remain exactly as they were previously. Now in the stanza 3, the lines are, the river has a soul. In the summer, it cuts through the land like a torrent of grief. Sometimes I think it holds its breath, seeking a land of fish and stars. Here the poet presents a contrast. Whereas in the previous section, she discussed mortality, in this section, she highlights the permanence of the river. we see the theme of spirituality and life. The river is personified. As you can see, the river as a soul. So a soul possessing a soul, a human being possesses a soul. Here the river possesses a soul. Therefore, here is the personification, drawing on the fact that nature is indeed living. In the summer, it cuts through the land like a torrent of grapes. So cutting is a feature of human being. Human being can cut. So again, there is a personification of the river. Most importantly, this is a swift change from the previous two stanzas which dealt with death. After personifying the wind in the first stanza, the poet now personifies the river. She says that like a human, the river has a soul, just as I say. However, while the soul of a human is transient, the river has an eternal soul. This is the difference. Whereas the human soul is transient, the soul of the river is permanent. It is an eternal one. In summer, it flows across lands. Here, she uses the metaphor of torrent of grief to portray the river's course in the dry season. The torrent of grief in summer points towards the possibility of drought or the water scarcity that comes with the overwhelming heat. So it is natural that due to the summer's heat, just like in today's unchanging weather, excessive heat, so there is indeed a possibility of drought, and that is expressed by the phrase torrent of grief, the land like a torrent of grief. Sometimes I think it holds its breath seeking a land of fish and stars. The poet personifies the river to invest it with the ideas of holding the breath and seeking something. She thinks as if the river is an explorer who seeks the land of fish and stars. So here again, the personification gets to another level. The poet personifies the river as an explorer. It is not simply a human being, but like an explorer. So this reminds us one of the significant point of Henry Worth's Longfellow's The Daybreak, where wind is personified with several other characters, like the mariner, like the rooster, etc. So we can see that all three elements of the earth, land, underwater, and the sky implied here. This may suggest the great and unavoidable power that nature has over everything, no matter which part of the world it may be. So the third stanza gives us the idea the river is the source of life. Now moving on to that stanza number 4, the river has a soul. This is a repetition of the line. It knows stretching past the town from the first drop of rain to dry earth and mist on the mountain tops. The river knows the immortality of water. Here the phrase the river has a soul is repeated. As we can understand, a refrain is used to highlight the importance of the line. Dai emphasizes the fact that the river flows throughout the land beyond the small town. The river fills the first drops of rain to its surface and flows up the mountain till it reaches the mist. Throughout all of this, it does not dry out. The river knows its own immortality. So stretching past the town from the first drop of rain to dry earth and mist on the mountain tops. So it reaches to the mountain tops mists. Also by saying that it knows. See here, this is significant. The speaker means the river flows through many areas and experiences different terrains of the plains and the mountains. So it knows means the river has the identification. So from immemorial time, the river is flowing. Because of the immortality of the river, this has happened here. With this line, we feel the permanence of the river. However, while its presence is permanent, it is always physically moving, traveling the world and gushing forward. So it is enliving. It is the lively force. It is always active. This is the difference between the river's permanence and the town's. The town is sedentary constant. What is sedentary? It's spending a lot of time sitting down and moving. While the river is a moving one. So it is fixed. The town is fixed, where the river is moving. We are also introduced to one type of immortality, the undying nature. So the undying nature is expressed through the moving capacity of the river. No life without water is the idea here, so we can understand it. It is the river on whose banks lie the settlements of the indigenous people. It is the water for which the saints prayed to Shiva for emanating the Ganges from his metal locks to earth. So this is the significance of the water. This is the significance of the river. Thus in the Indian mythology, the significance of water is grave indeed. So the bath of Ganges and the other rivers are too significant here. So this stanza teaches us the immortality of water. It is the river which is the soul of everything, and here the river carries the water. So the immortality of water is significant. Stanza 5 gives us the lines, a shrine of happy pictures marks the days of childhood. Small towns grow with anxiety for the future. The dead are placed pointing west. When the soul rises, it will walk into the golden east, into the house of the sun. Now the explanation says that in the fifth stanza, the focus shifts from nature back to the narrator. A shrine of happy pictures refers to the collection of captured childhood memories from the childhood days. Now, a shrine of happy pictures indicates the childhood memories. The childhood is said to be most free, happy and carefree time. Here I have given you a little bit of introduction or a little bit of explanation of what childhood is actually. We all know about that. There are not many worries. There is a purity of the soul. Children are not yet to be exposed to the harsh realities of life, etc. Now all of these we can find the Immortality Ode, that means Ode on Intimations of Immortality by Wordsworth. In this poem, stage-wise, Wordsworth cleared the different segments of a childhood, the childhood stages. Now the tone is in contrast to the third and fourth lines of the stanza, which shifts to anxiousness and restlessness. See here, small towns grow with anxiety for the future. Within these four lines, we see the growth of a person through the life cycle. The carefree, childish souls of the town grow into ones which understand the ways of the world. And when they do, the town together becomes more worried for the future. Nobody knows what comes after death, and this fear seems to cause this high tension. So it is afterlife. Nobody practically knows. Nobody has the whole or grasp over afterlife. So after death, what will come, we cannot understand. We never know. There is then a mention of the town's practice when one passes away. See, the dead are placed pointing west. When the soul rises, it will walk into the golden east, into the house of the sun. We see the theme of spirituality as Dai talks about the soul and its life after the body's death. The line, it will walk into the golden east, just as I said, refer to the sun rising in the east. Hence, when one dies, they are placed by the west so that their soul can walk towards the sun as it rises. The rising sun represents a new day. Therefore, this symbolizes new beginning and rebirth. That we can understand. This is very much easy to understand. The poem alludes to the rebirth of the soul once it rises out of the body it was in. This also suggests a theme of immortality, but a different kind from the reverse. This is the immortality of the human soul rather than of nature. So previously, what was the immortality of the water, the immortality of the river, the soul of the river? Here, immortality of the human soul. So human soul walks directly towards the rising east. So it is the house of the sun. So he is going to be attached to God. This reminds us George Herbert's The Retreat, a poem where the poet asserts that when we go to the childhood days, when we are moving back, when we are retreating, we are becoming very much inclined, very much attached to God. We are moving towards that house of the sun. So there is another reference of George Herbert's The Retreat. This stanza teaches us that immortality of the soul. Moving on to the stanza 6, in the cool bamboo restored in sunlight, light matters like this. Here the sunlight is what warms the cool bamboo. The bamboo symbolizes the body, while the sunlight symbolizes life. The sunlight restores the bamboo as life restores the body. Here life is a soul. Only with the entrance of a soul into the body can a new life be created. The soul is to the body what sunlight is to nature. So the sunlight is entering into the nature, into the bamboo. So the bamboo as a body gets its soul within. So it is becoming a human body, a complete pure human body. Throughout the poem, the anxiousness of death and the thought of immortality has been reiterated several times. It is referred once again, again and again. In the last line of this stanza, however, we see the acknowledgement of the importance of life for the first time, a positive take on the life and death cycle. So it is not always about death, it is not always about the negativity. It is about the life, it is about the sunlight, the sun and the experience of goodness. The tone of this line is cleverly placed at the end of the poem, creating a balance with the restless, gloomy nature of the topic of death, which has been previously talked about. See, life matters like this. So restored in sunlight, life matters like this. This is interesting. because life matters as the bamboos keep murmuring in the wind, adding to the greenery and vegetation. So it is the life, it is the vegetation, it is the world in the northeast Sikkim. The word bamboo has a mythical context. Bamboos are needed for huts, for making the bio, even for making baskets, courts, mud houses, and for fences it is needed. This is how life goes in the forest ranges, the hilly terrains where there is life too and it pulsates with. Here we can hear the mystic drums not of Nigeria but of Arunachal Pradesh. So these smaller lines very significantly hinting the basic aspects of Arunachal Pradesh, the nature, its very source. This stanza gives us the information that bamboo and sunlight is equal to body and soul, whereas bamboo is the body, sunlight is the soul. The last stanza, stanza 7, has these lines: in small towns by the river, we all want to walk with the gods. In the final stanza, Dai goes back to her roots. Quite literally, she returns to the first stanza, which is a homage to her native town. The plural small towns by the river suggests that she is referring to other such towns in general as well. She acknowledges that everybody from these towns have the aim to walk with the gods, which means that they all wish to live peacefully and happily in the afterlife. So who doesn't want it? Everyone wants the peaceful life after death. Everyone, in fact, wants a peaceful death. A peaceful death which is referred in the noble lecture of Mother Teresa. That peaceful death. This is the final element of immortality in the poem. Rather than the soul entering a new body, it travels to the heavens and walks with the gods. This provides a rather hopeful conclusion to the poem. Naturally, it practically concludes the poem, and with a hope, reinstating hope, it is giving us the positive vibe. Life and death is a continuous cycle in the midst of nature, but the end may not be as terrifying as one believes, for the soul will replenish in the sunlight and find a new source of life. Whether it is nature, a body on the earth, or the afterlife, wherever or whatever it is, life and death is a continuous cycle, and that we have to understand very carefully. To read the poem is to read the alternative version of history, is to know history through folk mediums and local sources. Yes, indeed it is true, because we do not read history, the alternative history, the history of the underdogs, the history of the underprivileged, the history of anything else except but that loot, plunder, etc., wars, etc. That we neglected regional history, and we attach importance to, as I said, war, loot, plunder, etc. So to read is to remember of the poems of Wolfswinkel, Gabriel Okra, Ben Okri, etc. To read the poem is to know the history of the seven sisterly states and to relate to and align it with otherwise to the main story. While reading the poem, the mind gets linked with Nagaland and the Naga sadhus, their rigorous and austere sadhana and hatha yoga, which but few know it. So naturally, if we read the poem very carefully with intensity, we can understand this is not about Arunachal Pradesh, or it is not about a small town. It is rather about the whole India, the underprivileged India, the not discussed topics of India. With this last stanza, we have to understand that there are several topics. We need to focus, we need to put lights on certain topics like political tension, pantheism, ephemeral human life, stylistic approach, memory, tradition and modernization, transient human life versus eternity of nature. One by one, we are going to discuss all of these topics. So let us first begin with the political tension. The northeast region of India has been a site of political tension, as we have already discussed it earlier, for a long time. These tensions exist between the states and the central government, as well as between the natives and the migrants from the other parts of India. The violent clashes between the insurgents means a rebellion, and the army also led to massive bloodshed. This is conveyed in the poem by the line, "Just the other day someone died." This expression makes it appear as if such deaths are due to insurgency and that they are very natural, very common to and happen almost every day. This is how the poetess conveys the intensity of suffering. If you take the phrase "the dreadful silence," here also there is a reference of curfews after such clashes. So this is the political tension that are clearly uttered and given in the poem, through the lines of the poems. Moving on to the next topic, that is the ephemeral human life. What is ephemeral? We will certainly know about that. The human life is temporary and ephemeral. That means fast fleeting because it ends so soon. The speaker contrasts this perishability of human life with the permanence of rituals and nature that we have already discussed earlier. The tribal rituals have been in existence since time immemorial. They have been passed down from one generation to the another since thousands of years. Thus, they have a sort of permanence in contrast to the human life, which is caught in a vicious cycle of life and death. See, the line life and death, only the rituals are permanent. So, this is the ephemeral human life. The life cycle will end, but the rituals will be permanent. They will remain as permanent. The speaker also gives some instances of prevalent rituals. For example, she mentions the ritual of placing the dead with their head pointing towards pointing westwards. So that so when their soul rises, it would go towards the golden east, meaning heaven, the region of the sun. So this is the nature of ephemeral human life that is suggested very significantly in the poem. The next one is the memory, tradition, and modernization. So you have to understand that modernity comes into existence, and here the poetess celebrates the rich culture and rituals of Northeast region. However, the speaker also expresses a feeling of lament because these perennial rituals and traditions are threatened by the so-called modernization. That she says small towns grow with anxiety of the future. So why there is anxiety? Because the small towns, what they have with them, the rituals, they will definitely vanish within some time. And these are the anxieties that the poetess tries to explore, because she is feeling, she wants the others to feel the same anxiety, because from the small towns, because of the modernization, because of the modern tendencies, these rituals will vanish. Through her poem, the poetess in fact tries to secure these rituals against the waves of time. In the process, memory plays an important role. The Northeast tribal communities have largely followed an oral culture in which their myths, folklore, conventions, and beliefs are passed orally from one generation to another. Dai tries to recall those memories from her shrine of happy pictures, that remember the childhood memories, so what I talked about in that stanza, and tries to make her memory more permanent by giving it a written form in the form of this poem. So she is writing this poem, as you can understand. If she is not going to write the poem about the oral culture, oral tradition of Adi tribe, so those factors will vanish eventually. They will be not remembered anymore. Because she is writing this poem, those will be remembered at least through her poem. So this is the memory, the impact of memory. In order to bringing back the tradition, due to the modernization, it is threatened, and memory only keep those things alive. The next topic is the transient human life versus eternity of nature. The speaker also contrasts the transient nature of human life and endeavors to the eternity of nature. As we can see that the torrent of grief through the river, the water has a soul, the water is permanent, it is the life seeker, etc. In this poem, the world of nature is presented primarily by the river, whereas human deaths are so frequent, the river is immortal. The river knows the immortality of water. At the same time, while the human world is marked by sadness and stagnancy, the natural world is full of vigor and movement because it is moving. Once she attaches the significance of movement with the water, so the river carries the water, the river also holds the water. It is the metonymy that the river is like the pot which holds the water. This contrast can be observed in the very first stanza of the poem. While the speaker's hometown lies calmly amidst the trees and is always the same, the dust is flying and the wind is howling down the gorge. So these are the factors. So there is the transient human life because dust is flying. On the other hand, eternity of nature, wind howling down the gorge. So this is the contrast, and through this contrast, the speaker very cleverly tries to bring down the contrast between the transient human life, fleeting human life, and the eternity of nature. So nature is always permanent. Now let us move on to the topic of pantheism. What is pantheism? The Adi tribe, just like Wordsworth, believed in the philosophy of pantheism. What is that? Identification of God with universe. For them, the world of nature was not dead, but alive with spirits. Thus they worshipped the mountains, the rivers, and the trees. Dai herself confessed that for her nature is a living presence, with which one can connect and empathize. This thought is reflected in the line, the river has a soul. So the personification, as you can remember while we were discussing earlier in the same video in one of the slides. In fact, the world of nature also responds to the happening of the human world. For instance, in this poem, the pain and suffering in the human world due to insurgency is echoed in the natural world by the river, which cuts through the land like a torrent of grief. So you can understand there is the insurgency, there is death, there is plunder, there is bloodshed, and in contrast there is river, there is the movement, there is the water, there is life. So through the worship of nature, the idea of pantheism comes forward. The erosion of culture and tradition in the Northeast also saddens, and thus it holds its breath and seeks a land of fish and stars. So trying to find out something new. The land of fish and stars refers to the river's desire to escape into the mythical land when the universe was being created and everything was pure. So in order to search the purity, the poetess mentioned the river. Through the river, because it cuts to the land of fish and stars, the poetess also wants to go back to the mythical world where everything remained as pure, not in today's world. To the last one, stylistic approach of the poem, because this is very significant and interesting, because this also makes the poem as a modern poetry, a masterpiece. It has no specific metrical form and is largely written in free verse. There are some internal lines like summer, winter, stanza 1, flying, howling, and stanza 1. There has been an extensive use of repetitions and alliterations. An example of repetition of the line is that life and death in stanza 2. The river has a soul has been used for a sort of reference in stanzas 3 and 4. This also brings us the significance of personification. The repetition of S, that means saw, sound, is very prominent in the poem. This can be seen in the line, seeking a land of fish and stars, in which the saw sound has been repeated 4 times. So this you can also use as an alliteration. All this grant a musical effect to the poem. The poem also contains some beautiful imagery related to the world of nature. A wreath of tuberoses, mist on mountains, cool bamboo restored in sunlight, etc. Commenting on the poetic beauty of Dai's poetry, the famous Indian poet Keki N. Darubola had rightly remarked that her poems are like wreaths of fireflies bargaining with the night. So it is indeed a very beautiful image to express the beautiful lines of Mamang Dai. Now, there are certain questions, following questions I'm going to give you. If you know the answer of the following, you probably mastered the poem. So here are the questions. Illustrate the conditional expression in your words, torrent of grief. How does the speaker compare his hometown with a small town? Why do the people of Adi community place the dead bodies west? How does the poet establish the immortality of water? How does the poetess establish the fact that river has a soul? Why does the poetess refer to bamboo? What does the river know? If you know the answers after thoroughly checking the video and after understanding the discussions, if you have literally understood that poem, you can easily answer these questions. So this is your test, whether you have really understood or not. Moving on to the last part, that those are the sources that I have used for my video as well as for your help. That one is that crmpmahavidyalaya.in. There you can find a brief analysis of the text. This one is a good summary. You can find a good summary here. The third one is a summary and analysis category. It belongs to that part. And the fourth one is the symbolism of the mountains, a study of selected poems of Mamang Dai by Harpreet Vora, where you can also find certain other poems, the analysis of other poems, and you can march them in your answer while writing, or you can give references from them. The last one is The Small Towns and the River by Mamang Dai by Vijaykant Dubey. This is an analysis, this is a summary, and you can have your materials, necessary materials. So these are the sources that I have used. Now, as it is always, thank you very much for your cooperation. You are supporting me very well, and hope that whatever I have said so far, although somehow superficially explained, not very well perhaps, but yes, whatever it is, hope it will help you. So till the next video comes, stay happy, stay healthy, stay blessed. Thank you.